Hi everyone, it's Dora here. So previously we talked about foundations of the feet or how to set up our foundation for standing poses. So in this video I want to talk a little bit about the hands. So I want to talk about this because there are many poses in yoga where we do have to weight bear with our hands. And as someone who has risk issues, that it was important for me to be supported while I'm in those poses where I am weight bearing on my hands. So just like the points of the feet, we also have certain areas of the hands that we want to contact the ground, but also there are certain areas in the hands where we want to keep the natural arch or the architecture of the hands to really for it to bear weight most efficiently. So one thing that I'll start off by saying is that when you are putting your hands on the ground for weight-bearing poses such as your plank pose, your downward facing dog, or anything else where you're bearing weight on your hands, one cue that you might have heard of in yoga classes is to spread the fingers out wide. Now, even though it is true that as you spread your fingers out wide, you have a wider base of support, but there is also the concern of over spreading the fingers. And as you do so, you might start to lose the natural curve or arch in the hand, which is so important in bearing weight. So we don't want to lose the natural architecture of the hand, this arching of the hand as you weight bear with them. So one thing that I would suggest is by grounding into the points of the hands. And I would say grounding to say the outer edge or the pinky finger side of the hand, and also grounding into the base of the thumb. And as you do so, we want to create a little bit of a suction cup action so that the middle of the palm stays lifted off the ground. And then another point that you might want to also notice is the base of the index finger. There is a tendency in certain poses, especially downward facing dog, that as we ground down into the hand, that we start to lift. So if I do this against the wall here, bring the camera a little closer. So as we start to ground down in certain poses, sometimes we tend to kind of lift up off the knuckle of the index finger, and as you do so, you're going to place a lot of weight in an area of your wrist. So if that's happening for you, what we want to do is spread the weight out across the hand from the pinky all the way towards the thumb, and you may have to pay a little more attention to draw the index finger, the knuckle of the index finger down, so that you can now evenly distribute the weight across your wrist. So as you ground down with your fingers not spread out as wide as you can get them, but a comfortable spreading of the fingers such that you can still keep the architecture of your hands. So as you ground down, you're going to still feel a lifting up of the middle of the palm. And then you might create similar action with your fingers and gently press down into the finger pads and creating this sort of suction cup action in the fingers as well. So that is the first point that I want to note about the hands. Now the second thing I want to talk about is actually about transferring the weight from your body into your hands, into the ground. Or, you can also think about the pathway the opposite way. How does the energy travel from your hands up your arms, and where does it end? So for many people, we might visualize that the arm ends in the shoulders. And as we ground down into our arms, into our hands, just visualizing and feeling where that weight is traveling and how that weight is traveling along our limbs is going to really help to find a more balanced way and more supportive way of weight bearing. So first of all, sometimes when we place weight into our hands, we might focus a lot on bearing down into the hands, and a lot of the weight might be coming from your wrist joint. So as we are, bearing our weight into the hands, one thing you might think about is, what if this weight is not, what if we're not grounding from the wrist down, but more so from higher up? So you might visualize as though you're trying to ground down from the top of the arm all the way down into the point of the hands and into the earth 2 feet below. And as you do so, you might feel a natural lengthening of your arms and engaging of the muscles along the arms, and sort of spreading out or lengthening of even creating space in the joints and more evenly distributing the weight along the joints in your limbs, into your hands, into the earth. Now, the interesting thing is that your arm doesn't end in your shoulders. It actually finds its way to your sternum. So the where the 2 collarbone connects. So if we think of it this way, then the energy travels from, so if we're going backwards, say if we start from the fingers, into the hands, into the wrists, into the elbow, up to the shoulder. And what happens here is that it starts to travel down your shoulder blade, and then it goes up and around across the spine of the shoulder blade, and then it connects to your collarbone, and then into your sternum. And then from here, the weight is distributed across your rib cage and finds your spine, and the weight then finds the front of your spine and can either go up, release up through the crown of the head, or down into the lower limbs. So if we think of it this way, then the end of your arms or your upper limbs actually sort of end here in where the collarbones meet. So if we think of it this way, then as we weight bear with our hands, with our arms, we really want to be able to feel a clear pathway of weight that can travel all the way from our sternum, round the shoulder blades, and then down our arms, into the wrists, and out into the fingers, and down into the ground, or vice versa. Visualizing in such a way where you're feeling energy from the hands all the way up the arms, around the shoulder blades, and ending in your sternum. So whenever you are weight bearing, you might try this at home, and just, setting up the fingers, setting up your hands, making sure you're happy, finding that sort of suction cup action where you're keeping this natural arch of your hand. So I always think of, as I'm grounding down my hands, I'm creating a little bit of pocket of space underneath, and imagine there's a beautiful little ladybug that's, just hiding underneath my hands. And as I ground down, I want to make sure that I don't accidentally squish the bug. And then once you have the hand set up, start to feel it in your body, what it feels like as you start to transfer or weight bear into the hands, noticing where the weight is traveling down along your arm. This might be the first thing you can visualize first, is to imagine, say, the energy is coming from the tops of the arms, grounding down. And then also playing around with the space to see, you know, if you're lifting up off, you know, certain knuckles where you're creating a lot of weight in one area of the wrist versus being able to spread out the weight evenly all along the wrist. And then once you have that feeling into the arms, into the wrist, into the hands, you can start to take that pathway a little further and visualize and feel the energy or the weight traveling around the shoulder blade. And you know, this area for me is a little bit subtle. I don't feel so much, but I do definitely feel the energy connecting back around the front of my chest. So as you can feel into it while you're grounding down into your hands, you might start to feel the energy from your hands along the arms, and sort of this movement here, this kind of lock here in front of the shoulder blades, the collarbones, and along the other arm. So this is much more sort of a way for you to feel supported and stable in your weight-bearing pose without actually trying to determine where you should place your shoulders or how your shoulder blades should look, where are they supposed to be on your back. Because again, like we mentioned in a previous video, that all our bodies are built differently. And so, you know, knowing what feels supportive to you is going to be a much better way to evaluate whether you're feeling safe and happy in a particular pose, rather than just visually looking at you and seeing, you know, how different body parts are you know, looking in certain areas of the body, because that may not always be the concern. So so feeling into what feels stable, what feels supportive, how can you spread out the weight or distribute the weight evenly along your joints or within a joint, and feeling that pathway from your fingers through your hands along the arms, eventually finding its way to meet at the front of your chest. And that is going to help you determine whether you're weight bearing in a way that is supportive to you or not. So hopefully that was helpful, and I will see you next time. Namaste.